Choose your story, change your life. Full book summary. Table of contents. Overview. The power of stories. Reconstructing your stories. Tales of transformation. About the author. Overview. The stories we tell ourselves determine our destiny. Self-stories are the narratives that describe who we are and everything we are capable of doing. Only you can change your self-story, so it is important to know how. In Choose Your Story, Change Your Life 2022, storyteller and keynote speaker Kindra Hall explains what stories are, explores their power, and details how you can rewrite the bad ones into good ones that will impact your life positively. Along the way, she shares stories from both her own life and other people's lives. Chapter 1. The Power of Stories. When Kindra Hall went to Slovenia for a marketing conference, she and her husband decided to turn her trip into a mini vacation. They agreed not to buy anything while they were there, but she was sorely tempted by a pair of sparkly shoes that reminded her of the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. The story had always fascinated Kindra, as in the Emerald City, anyone could be whoever they wanted to be. The iconic road, Yellow Brick Road, represents the path we create for ourselves through our stories. Consider the example of Mike, a father of 3. He is a loyal and hard-working guy, but he is not satisfied with his job. His supervisor tried to sabotage him multiple times and gave him a low ranking. This was Mike's last straw, and he decided to find something new. He had been working at this company for 25 years, and had considered leaving for almost all of them. He never took the first step to seeing what else could be waiting for him. He had been offered multiple opportunities elsewhere. He had failed to change his story. Storytelling has always been a shortcut. It allowed humans to share information about hunting for food and making weapons. It accelerated learning. Self-stories are a form of habits. We use this voice to solve our problems, to motivate ourselves, and to reflect. Self-stories help us make sense of the world. However, they are also survival mechanisms, which sometimes make us settle for the safe version of life rather than the more risky but promising version. This leads people to live a toned-down version of their best life. A great story should be able to capture your attention. It should also help you learn and make you happy. Stories have a physical effect on your brain, both through the hormones released, such as the love hormone oxytocin, and through training the brain via visualization. Telling yourself stories of who you want to be can greatly impact your brain's abilities. An example of this is a study conducted by Robert Rosenthal, a Harvard psychologist. He gave IQ tests to 2 groups of children. He told the first group that they performed at a higher level. A while later, he retested both groups, and the first group performed better than before, even though they hadn't actually performed better than the second group. What he told them motivated them to perform better, and change their brains. It is not easy to take control of our stories, but the results are both promising and surprising. Kindra has worked with a lot of people and taught them the power of storytelling. These people have reported feeling more optimistic and satisfied. They were less fearful of failure, less worried, and more confident. Self-stories are automatic and subconscious. They are set off by different interactions and occurrences that you might not notice. For example, you may unconsciously prevent yourself from going to the gym by having painted yourself as someone who cannot commit to things. This is a story that you may not notice, and that has a negative impact on your life. But habits can be broken and replaced with better ones. Once you have an opportunity to notice the story that drives your habit, you must try to reshape it into something better and then internalize it. Chapter 2. Reconstructing your stories. Just like the giant iceberg that destroyed the Titanic, in adult life, there is always something lurking in the shadows that could destroy us. Stories you are not proud of can be spotted during iceberg moments. When an unfortunate event happens in your life, it is an opportunity to notice the bad stories that you have been blind to. Negative thoughts such as, "I'm not good enough," are self-sabotaging and have a big impact on your life. The first thing you must do is become aware of them, which will allow you to start changing them. Self-stories that are working against you often include the words, "always," and "never." Another clue is telling yourself that you cannot do something in your story. If you're lucky, you may catch yourself saying these phrases out loud. For example, Maggie realized that she was making excuses that sounded positive but were actually keeping her from reaching her full potential. One of her excuses was that you cannot fix what you were born with. Another one was that you only live once, which justified bad choices that were not aligned with her goals. You must ask yourself which habits are the opposite of what you want and become aware of them. Once you are aware of these stories, start analyzing them and finding the right stories to replace them with. Rationalizing and reassuring do not usually work, as simple words cannot undo years of bad affirmations. Our stories are shaped by our memories, which are in turn influenced by our feelings and emotions. The more negative the emotions, the more the memories and stories stick with us. An impactful story usually has one or more of four components: identifiable characters, authentic emotion, a significant moment, and specific details. The more components it has, the more impactful a story will be. These components are what make stories so effortlessly powerful. The character in the story can be you. You are able to remember different versions of yourself in your stories. The character can also be any person in your life. These characters all have one thing in common: they made you feel something. Emotion is the most important component. An encounter can last a couple seconds, but if it makes you feel something profound, then it will have a great impact on you. Kindra remembers an encounter she had when she was frustrated, confused, lost, and alone. That person told her that she looked beautiful. She still remembers that short encounter and notes the impact it had on her. Details also make stories more believable and memorable. Once you catch a story in action through an "I am" statement, you start making sense of it. This is the first step in analysis. Start doing this by taking a trip through your past memories. You can tackle both decade-old memories and day-old ones. Once you find a story, make sure you do not forget about it. As humans, we are unreliable narrators, and we do not tell stories objectively. Instead, we tell them through our subjective point of view. This leads us to morph stories into a black and white mold. However, the most beautiful quality of stories is that they are malleable, and we can change them. We have all experienced moments when we felt that we were a failure and there was nothing left for us in life. However, we kept going, and our ability to rewrite our stories is what helped us. If you want to change a story you are not satisfied with, you have to be able to identify one that does satisfy you. Finding positive stories to replace the negative ones is usually where most people struggle the most. A common unconscious occurrence is when we adopt other people's stories, especially when it comes to our parents. We often adopt their behaviors and stories, and even if they are not necessarily negative, they do not fit us in our lives. This can also happen with any person in your life, even if you do not know them well. The result can be toxic as it leads to comparison and feeling like you won't be able to measure up to them. In order for a new story to stick, you need to reinforce it just as you would reinforce a new habit. Stories and habits have the same neurological base in the connections that form in the brain. To internalize a story, you need to give it initial exposure. This requires engagement and practice. Share your stories out loud with yourself or others, start your day with your new stories, and plan your days according to them. You can practice through journaling. It is an important part of storytelling, as writing things down not only helps us remember, but also slows us down and forces us to really think through what we're writing about. It is important to journal both your good and bad times so you can look back on both and constantly learn from your past. A trigger is something that sets off a desire to act in a way that isn't good for us. Triggers can be people, recurring events, social media, a certain time of day, or a feeling such as not being caffeinated or being hungry. A very common desire is eating sweets, which is why so many people choose to eat candy when under stress. You can choose to rewrite the story of your triggers in order to avoid these unhealthy desires. Rewriting stories is tough, but it is always worth it in the end. There is also value in sharing your stories with other people and encouraging them to share their stories with you. Once you start rewriting more positive stories, you will notice the value of making better choices and decisions because of them. Chapter 3. Tales of Transformation. Storytelling is important in all aspects of business, including marketing, sales, leadership, and personal branding. We do not have much control over the stories that other people tell about us, but we all spend a lot of time thinking about what other people think about us. Instead, try to shift your focus towards the stories you tell yourself and others, especially the ones that drive and advance your professional aspirations. Kindra often finds herself feeling that she is not good enough, and that people do not respect her or her ideas. This thought process is very common in women, who are often discriminated against in the workplace. They tend to use phrases such as, "Do you know what I mean?" which express self-doubt. When you catch yourself saying such phrases, know that this is a story you need to work on rewriting. Throughout your life, you will receive a lot of feedback. It can be both constructive and hurtful. It is important to note how you take criticism, as this can also be a story that needs improvement. If you are told, for example, that you need to be a better team member, it may mean that you were not used to succeeding as a team as a kid, but rather on your own. Always think of feedback as a self-story catching tool. Current behaviors are direct hints into figuring out toxic self-stories. For example, Tammy works in digital marketing and recently quit her job to move to a new city with endless opportunities for people with her skill set. However, she feels paralyzed and does not know where to start. This made her realize that she is afraid of getting rejected, because she was rejected many times in the past. She needs to accept that her past does not dictate her present or her future, and she needs to write a better story for herself. On the other hand, visualizing your goals too much can have a negative impact. You might accidentally convince your brain that you are closer to them than you actually are. This will lead to you losing motivation to work hard towards them. You should always make sure to keep track of where you actually are in relation to your goals. While the right mindset cannot heal you completely, it still has an important role in helping you recover. Zara's husband was diagnosed with cancer, and she blamed it on herself. She could not face the idea of living without him, and was projecting her negative thoughts on him. However, this was not the right approach. A more positive approach was better for both her and her husband, and they stopped imagining the worst-case scenarios. Through the hard months of chemo, Zara talked to her friends and family about what she was going through, and it helped her. She and her husband kept imagining scenarios of a life outside hospitals, until he got better. They can now both tell the story of his recovery. Better stories will not heal you, and negative stories aren't what cause cancer. However, better stories help you get through the hardships of being sick. Another way stories are powerful is through money. The power of money essentially comes from stories, which is why we can easily change our stories surrounding money. A lot of us experience anxiety about money. Amy, for example, does not have a stable income. She would love to spend more time with her family and do fun things with them, but the voice in her head always warns her about how much it would cost. Instead of trying to make it work, she settles on thinking that she will never have enough money. This was not only preventing her from enjoying the money she had, but it was also keeping her from making more money. She eventually managed to replace her toxic stories with more positive ones, such as how she managed to quit her job and find a new one, and how she got over the struggles of divorce. For every story you capture and share, you help create other people who will not let toxic stories control them and their lives. They will be able to choose the best stories because you showed them how, through your own stories. About the author, Kindra Hall is the best-selling author of stories that stick and a sought-after keynote speaker. She helps people and companies communicate better through strategic storytelling. She shares stories of inspiring people in Success magazine as well as on her own podcast. She first realized the power of stories when she was a teacher trying to get an elementary school class to listen.